Hey, all. Welcome to the Anxiety Warriors podcast. We are your hosts, Margot
and Abby. We are friends, teachers, and storytellers, but above all, we're anxiety warriors on a mission to raise awareness and understanding about anxiety and mental health.
You will hear honest, engaging, and joyful stories from us and many other anxiety warriors about living with anxiety. If you're seeking a space to laugh, connect, feel inspired and empowered, and learn valuable tips rooted in mindfulness and more, your warrior community is here for you.
Join us as we navigate this journey of life together.
Welcome back, warriors.
Yay!
We have an amazing guest for you today. She's amazing. Her name is Giselle Shardlow. And before Abby hops into her recap, as she does, let me let you all know a little bit about who Giselle is. Kids Yoga Stories was founded in 2012 by former classroom teacher and trained yoga instructor Giselle Shardlow. Through her travels and teaching grades K through 5th in Guatemala, Australia, Canada, and the United States, Giselle witnessed the need to address childhood illiteracy, obesity, and stress. She blended her passions of yoga, mindfulness, and education to create books, card decks, courses, and educational resources to bring the benefits of yoga to children everywhere. The pandemic and the rise in mental health issues in children, as well as teacher burnout, has made the Kids Yoga Stories mission even more critical and timely. They continue to grow and expand, providing weekly free resources and hundreds of yoga products available for purchase on their site, kidsyogastories.com. Oh, Giselle is so lovely.
Yes.
We had just the best conversation with her. Literally can't wait for you all to hear it. So excited.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, we say this a lot, but I think this is part of being an anxiety warrior. Is like when you just meet people you just connect with and you just want to keep talking, right? You don't even feel like you're podcasting. You're like, okay, I have to stay on topic for the podcast for the listeners.
Yes.
But I want to say so many things. I'm going to try to slip them in and ask questions and this and that because you just feel connected with this other person. That is Giselle. That was the experience. It was just, I've never met her before. This was the first time ever. And I just felt so connected and just wanted to hear so much story, of her story.
Totally.
So, yeah.
Totally. Giselle hosts a podcast herself. I was lucky enough to be a guest, which is how we connected initially. And it was by one of our former guests, Larissa Noto, who had connected us. And so Giselle talks to kids yoga professionals. And so I was a guest. Abby's going to be a future guest. And yeah, she's just, I knew right after connecting with her on her show, I want to know more about this person. She has an anxiety story to share. So boom, here we go.
Yes.
Coming on the show. Let's hear your story. And it's always a little bit of anxiety right before we hit record. We talk about it all the time. But then sometimes we talk to people that just instantly put us in a state of ease, right? In a state of ease. And Giselle is that kind of person. You could just imagine what a wonderful mother, friend, family member, and teacher she must be. Because she's just so lovely and grounding and wonderful. So so Abby, tell us about this chat.
So Giselle starts off by sharing her before and after anxiety. And she starts off by sharing, how she grew up having all these labels like worry wart or you need to develop a thicker skin or you're too sensitive, but there was no actual word for anxiety. And so she didn't realize that her experiences might be a little bit more anxious. She takes us to her journey to Guatemala, where there are, the potential of kids getting kidnapped and men with guns. And she's just kind of living her life being a teacher there. She started having some stomach issues. And it wasn't until a doctor was like, hey, do you think this is anxiety? That she started to realize oh, maybe there's some anxiety here. And Giselle also shares the after being, after she has a child and what it's like being a new mother and caring for your child with their big emotional experiences. And she just shares so many beautiful practices and ways to think about her life and finding balance in her life. And I really like when she shared this one part about being able to put effort towards stuff, but also surrendering. And that's really going to stick with me along with everything else. It was just such a joy.
Yeah. That's going to stick with me along with everything else.
Yeah.
Other.
It was really hard to recap this because I wanted to talk about the single focus and overcoming your obstacles. And I wanted to talk about the Eastern and the Western and, This is a hard
literally
recap because
everything.
there's so many good parts. How do you summarize this podcast?
It's impossible. It's impossible. Each of us has an impossible job. You can cut this part if you want. Yours is doing the recap and mine is writing the descriptions for our episodes, right? It's just like, hey, summarize, a super long conversation that's layered and deep and vulnerable and just, so many things going on in a conversation, and sum it up in a few words, a few sentences,
Yeah.
and make it interesting enough for people to keep listening and or to want to listen at all. So
Yes.
gotta love that part of it. Gosh,
Mhm.
you guys are just going to love this conversation. You're
Yes.
going to love this conversation. Keep listening, enjoy. I'm gonna be re-listening because it's jam-packed with so much stuff, so much goodness, so much wisdom and joy. So
Yes.
without further ado, here's the show. Welcome, warriors.
Yay.
We are joined today with Giselle Shardlow. Giselle, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, you two.
Yay.
We're
Thanks
so excited to connect with you today and hear more about your anxiety story. So let's hop right in. How does anxiety show up in your life?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much to you two for even hosting this. This is not something that I feel is normalized out in the world. And I have to say, I was confronted thinking about coming on today because it really had me like that mirror, really looking at myself. So I really appreciate you two. And I think there's a lot to be said. So, we'll dive in with that, but this will be a
Thank you so
thread
much.
throughout. So how does it show up? This is what I found so fascinating is that I really had to think of, I don't want to ramble forever, but to me, it was sort of like my life before having a child and my life after, right?
Mhm.
Because I operate under like it has to make sense, right? And before having a child, I would say when I was growing up, I was called like a worry wart or you're too sensitive, or my dad would say you have to grow thicker skin. We didn't really have this word anxiety, it just wasn't something that was normal that we talked about, right? And then I look back and I think about these little moments in time. So I traveled the world, right? And who can do that if you're anxious, right? So I'm in third world countries. I moved to Guatemala as a teacher. And I remember in Guatemala, I was sick all the time. I had stomach issues, digestion issues all the time. And after my 5th year there, I remember sitting across from the colonoscopy doctor, right? And he said, we went over my results and everything, and I was hospitalized. This whole thing. It never stopped me from living there. I loved it so much that I dealt with all these issues, right? And he says to me, "Have you thought about that? Maybe you're anxious." I'll never forget
Wow.
that. And in that moment, I thought, no, Meanwhile, I'm living in a third world country, right? And I'm working with the wealthy Guatemalans, right, at school that may or may not get kidnapped for money. I live in a place down the road with a bunch of other expats, young in our 20s. There's men with guns everywhere. There's always something going on, whether it's weather related or men are escaping from the prison or there's always stuff, right? And I think that I didn't realize how much I was carrying it in me. It was just this sort of nervous energy. So at that moment I was like, no, I'm good, I'm all set, carry on in life. Then I moved to Australia. All this I was in San Francisco. So it was my superpower, I think, right, is the way I was able to be in the world. And then I had a child. Oh my gosh. So nothing prepared me for being a mom, right? I was a teacher for 10 years. I've got a master's degree in education. I thought, yeah, I got this, right? Nothing prepared me for the little person that I had. And I had her at 39. So I wasn't young. I was too busy having a great life, right? So you two, she came out, a lot of everything, a lot of emotions, tantruming, screaming, breastfeeding was hard. Then she grew up taught, like everything was hard about her, right? And I would try and get help from people, and people couldn't really, they would just say, oh, it's because she's an only child, or it's because you're too accommodating. Like there was all this stuff, right? And then we got her diagnosed during COVID. So that, of course, COVID hit, right? And there's a piece there where your whole life is coming, you know, down on top of you. We got her diagnosis, and she was diagnosed with anxiety, depression, autism, ADHD, all these things. And in that moment, I just could not stop crying because I thought, okay, I feel validated in one way,
Yes.
right? Of it wasn't just me,
Yeah.
but where does this come from? What could I have done differently? And I was thinking, I don't have anxiety. What's going on? And she became my biggest muse, right? My mirror. Okay. And then my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer, and her anxiety started to show up a lot more. And my upset for her, and then fast forward, she passed, my father passed last year unexpectedly. So all these things in life, and I find myself at the end of the year, I'm now, subbing. I have this, my business. And when I finish my teacher subbing, I come home at the end of last year and I can barely function, like literally.
Yeah.
And I decided to go to the doctor. I mean, I couldn't stop crying with grief of my parents. They were my everything. And I started anxiety meds, right? So that's how it shows up for me. It's like this before and after, and now, I'm nervous coming on here. Like I can feel the anxiety, right?
Yeah.
It's more present now than ever has been.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I mean, it's just so like anxiety in general is just so fascinating because like you have this division of pre-child, post-child, right?
Yeah.
And like now you're seeing it and in response and in relation to all these life events, but also you had it before. But like how you managed it in a sense, like the like I love that you said like you went and you traveled and you lived in different countries and you did all these things because I think one of the misconceptions with anxiety is we're weak, we're afraid, we can't handle a lot, right?
Right.
And we just do it. We just do it very uncomfortable in our own skin, or we just do without realizing like how much stress we have about it, or how much overthinking, or And so I really just appreciate like the different ways it showed up or hasn't showed up in your life.
Yeah.
And then, I just have like I was taking notes and there's just so many things like first of all, it really stuck to me when you were saying like all the names that you were told, like you're a worrywart and you need thicker skin and you're so sensitive. Like Margot and I heard those too. And I think that part's really interesting. Like when we didn't have the language for anxiety, like all the labels we gave to people, right? That weren't just like matching what we thought people should be like in the world, right? And it made me think about like, what are the casual phrases we now say to people?
Yeah.
Because we don't have that language yet, whatever that might be, right?
Right.
So, and then the other thing I just want to say is with your daughter. What is her name?
Anamika.
Anamika. Wow, that's pretty.
I never share it actually. So this is quite, yeah.
Hopefully that's okay. But it's, it sounds, I don't want to say bittersweet, but just the fact that like you knew deep down something was wrong and you're being told like as a new mom, like, oh, you're overthinking or you're coddling, and you being told you're doing things wrong and then that like validation, but also now knowing like, okay, now I have a child that requires different needs and different ways of helping her be in the world. I don't know. I just find everything you said fascinating. And I don't know if I even have a question so much as just like how anxiety just shows up so differently and how it changes as we age and in response to all our different life events.
Yeah.
Like,
I think if you take that bigger picture, right? Thinking about like I started to learn from my mom, they were both born in England and she reckons they brought, they had anxiety from when they were little. She took on the anxiety of her grandparents, like that book, Grandmother's Hands. I think, did we talk about that before?
No.
I'll have to get it out. Something about we can put in the show notes, but it's all about understanding your lineage. So the anxiety was thread through there, and now I've got this interesting thread through my daughter. She's a mirror to me, but I think it's all about how we frame it. And now she's 12 and she's a beautiful human being. Like I adore her, and she's complicated and complex, and
Yeah.
we're on this journey together. So I think that it's about honoring where we are, as you say, in our life, and sort of seeing that sort of bigger picture.
Yeah.
I
Right.
think that it's interesting. I love that you use the phrase the before anxiety and the
Yeah.
after anxiety. I think that that's something that so many of our warriors can relate to
Mm.
because, all of us come to, or many of us do, come to our origin story, right, at different points in our life, or maybe the origin of like when you realized your experience was anxiety versus when it actually started, which was probably many years earlier than that
Mm.
moment. But I appreciate you speaking about the differences and the types of anxiety you experienced, right? Because before, when you were traveling the world, you were living in different countries, you had men with guns. And I mean, so many things that maybe would stress out just anyone normally, right? Or just typically speaking. And that you really didn't link it to anxiety until someone was like, hey, you think maybe you might be experiencing some anxiety? And you were like, wait, what? But yet you still pushed through and kept living in that situation, or kept doing
Right.
whatever you were doing. And part of me wonders that when your anxiety shifted after becoming a mom and seeing your daughter struggles and in all the years of being gaslit, it sounds like, by doctors and community and whatever, um, is that the main difference is that you were not coping with your own anxiety just anymore, right? Or your own body's experience or your own thoughts. You're
Mm.
coping with all of that, but also the stress of having to raise a child, right?
Yeah.
And all
Yeah.
her needs, and then the needs of your parents. And this is the kind of thing that also doesn't get talked about enough in terms of like when people reach their middle age and life really changes so drastically, whether it be additions to your family or losses in your family, like things like that
Mm.
are just not
Caregiving.
openly caregiving, right?
Oh,
Caregiving for children and parents or grandparents, or
Yeah.
and I very much appreciated this sort of before and after differentiation for you, because I feel like
Mm.
it's deeply relatable for any age person that could be listening to your story, right? It's just like it
Yeah.
doesn't matter what stage you are in your life, um, to have some kind of experience with the differences that anxiety can kind of.
Mm.
I'll use a word that one of our former guests used, Becky Fontaine, shape shifting, right,
Yeah.
and
Right.
changing, and
Yeah.
um, so yeah, I'm curious, do you think it's some of it was just why it maybe feels different or stronger now is because this is about something that I imagine you feel like your heart beats on your right because of your daughter. And so like is the before anxiety, was it easier, would you say, than the now anxiety in some way?
Yeah, this is something I don't have a clear answer on. This has been such a good experience to reflect on. I think I sort of feel like it was sort of sunshine and rainbows. I had an amazing childhood growing up in the middle of Canada on a farm, and I traveled, and life was fabulous. Of course, I had, you know, relationship breakups and family and friendships upset. So I must have been upset at different times, but I'm left with like sunshine and rainbows, and then now I just feel like life is heavier. There's more responsibility. We now own a house. We have a family. My husband is also a lot of everything. So I have a responsibility to them. And, it's not just me anymore. It's sort of flitting around the world.
Yeah,
So, and I think
it's
that the
interesting.
difference, I know we're similar in age, but I think that difference in age actually does matter in terms of mental health. So
Mm,
I do think that age difference, I think we didn't talk about it or know about it. My British parents were like, living in Canada, and, they were just so happy to be there in this open country and safe. And, we're happy go lucky. So,
yeah,
yeah,
just
sometimes life
interesting.
changes as you don't expect. And yeah,
Right.
it's like the anxiety was there, as you say, and it's just grown. And,
yeah.
can we shrink it? We'll see.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
interesting. I like that. Just we'll see, right? It's open
Yeah.
ended. So talk to us about some of the ways, and you can put this in the past or in the present or some combination of both, about some
Mm.
of the ways that anxiety has manifested in you physically, in your mind, your body, your behaviors, and things like that.
Mm. Yeah, this is fascinating, right? Is tuning in. I think when I did yoga teacher training, I learned that I'm a Vata dosha of the Ayurveda science, the sister science of India. And I have some Kapha too as my subdosha. So my Vata brain is very scattered. Like I talk fast and I've like, when I'm running around, I'm creative and I have all of that, right? So that puts me very airy. And so you think about how it manifests for me. My thoughts are fast, my words are fast, um, I'm not always like a clear speaker. It's just like bleh, lots of tumbles out, right?
Yeah.
And then physically, it's in my stomach. And that's really where in Guatemala was evidence of that. It's really where that began. So I'm, digestion issues the last couple of years with all the things going on with my family. It is right there. I see a doctor and they look at what they need to look at, but I work with, looking at foods, and I work with an energy medicine practitioner to look at like, how do I help the energy in my body? How do I soothe my internal, digestion and heartburn and things like that. So yeah, it's that's where my vulnerability is in my tummy.
Yeah, I feel you. I'm technically a Vata too, right? Very
Oh,
ether and air, and
yes.
right, like I totally feel that so much, and scattered but
Yes.
creative, and just
Yeah.
like all
Yeah.
over the place. Like grounding is really hard.
Yeah.
Remembering to be in your body is really hard.
Yeah. Right.
But oh my gosh, I when you just brought up Guatemala again, like when you bring it up, like I just in my mind, I'm like, like, did you think you were nervous? Like, were you at all consciously worried? Like, even painting the picture of like kids possibly being kidnapped and men with,
Yeah.
like, I have anxiety thinking about that now, and I've never been in that situation, right?
Yeah.
But like, it's like,
No.
no.
No, I loved it. I loved every day, every minute. It was such an adventure. The teaching was amazing. I was a young teacher. I got to do
Yeah.
whatever I wanted, right?
Yeah.
Had all the fun. I worked at International American School, so we travel on the weekends on the little chicken bus, and yeah, I mean, it was amazing. I've had an
Wow.
incredible life.
Wow.
So
Oh,
fortunate. Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
When you mentioned right at the beginning, you said, yeah, like the tuning in. I use that phrase so often. So like, what does like a tune in look like for you? And is it something that I mean, you obviously have yoga and mindfulness practice. And so like, is it instinctual when it comes to you noticing things in your body and your mind, or is it a challenge, even though that it's your life's work sort of is tuning in?
Yeah, I would say breath. Breath is my number one that has been absolutely crucial to my mental health, especially over the last few years. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. So warriors, checking in with your breath. It's just, it's sort of like it's not the easiest thing to remember, right? But that's why we call it a practice. It's something you can try, right? Checking in, tune into the breath, just ask it for information, pay attention to it. Yeah. So going off of that, talk to us about some of the ways that you cope with your anxiety, some things that are kind of go-tos or that are typical strategies that often serve.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if going back to that, I think if I had the one thing, like, the one message to send to the world, it would definitely be breathe well. And this book, do you know this book, Breath by James Nestor? Amazing, right? And that really, for me, I was on this pathway of thinking about how to support my parents and my daughter and my husband, and that's really what came up over and over again, right? It's secular, it don't need anything extra, you can take a few seconds, that to me. And we also have breathing cards too, so I use those with my daughter, but that would be the main thing. And then of course the yoga practice, movement is so important. My morning meditation is a must. Running has been absolutely crucial too. So to get everything moving, right? To get my energy and to calm my mind, to ground me, running has been really important. Talking to friends, I've gotten the most amazing friends and community around now that I've lost my family. So that is really important to me. And essential oils. So right before I got on here, I love doTERRA. I've got some steady and For Vata, there's a vetiver I put on, and a balance I put on. So I always have essential oils around. And I love affirmations. So we create these affirmation cards. I have those behind me all the time. And I've got, angel cards I look at in the morning, that kind of thing. And then I was mentioning right at the beginning that I did turn to anxiety and depression meds in December, and I'm going to do this for 6 months and then come off. But that was a big decision. And I know that I'm putting it out there because I know that people would have opinions or not. And I think I had to go through my own journey. And that was an incredible step for me that allowed me to be free in that moment to move forward, because I know that my parents would want me to be happy and be successful. And so I needed some help. I think sometimes it's okay to, say, I'm not doing well right now, and I know I can do better. And I read, When the Body Keeps Score, and I learned in that beginning of that book about how important it is, how important medication was. Like, what was that journey? I've never read about that, and how it has helped the mental health. And I thought, you know what? It's okay. There's no shame. It's okay to take medication. This is why it was made for us. So my thought is 6 months, and we'll see. Yeah.
And
so those are my main things. Yes, my check-in. So I think for me, I'm just really passionate about a balanced lifestyle, and I am a Libran, so that's where that balance comes from. Yeah,
Love
but
it.
doing it all and having it all.
Yes, doing it all.
I've been on meds, right? So I lost a parent, and I have ADHD, and there are times when I just need that extra support, right? And especially like in the combination, because when I was going through grief and I have ADHD, like, holy crap, I needed something to support me in just being able to be like functional every day, right? And so I really appreciate anytime we have guests that come on and talk about taking meds, because I do feel like for a long time I was like, no, I'm not taking like in the wellness world, it's like, no, don't do that. You have everything you need within you. And it's like, well, yes. And sometimes I don't, right? And so I just want to say, like, thank you for sharing that part, because I do know that it can be a little bit, anxiety producing to share that, like, hey, I've tried out meds, right? Because you never know who's going to have an idea or a judgment about it. And I just think it's really important to normalize that getting external help is okay, right? And then you build on that, right?
Yeah. On the other side of that, what's interesting is that that's sort of the Western medicine. On the other side of that, I started seeing an energy medicine practitioner. And that also, people could have opinions like, that's a bit woo-woo, because this is looking at our aura and our chakras and our Tibetan rings and all these kinds of things, right? But that has been transformational for me, and I don't tell many people because it's such a personal experience. But I tell you, for me, she just works. Like, it works for me. She kind of puts me back together, and all my pieces get back aligned. So that's been extraordinary, not just our physical bodies, but really having this understanding of our subtle bodies, our energy bodies, has been amazing.
I love that. I just think it's so important that we all feel supported. And so when you try a bunch of stuff, you're more likely to find the stuff that supports you. And so whether or not someone else thinks it's crazy or it's woo-woo or it's too Western or it's too Eastern, who cares, right? Like, and maybe it takes getting to a certain age, but like, I've let go of a lot of shame around certain things that I like to incorporate in my practice, or things that I, want to believe. And some of it's just because, like, I need a little magic in my life. So, like, who cares if I want to hold this crystal for 5 minutes and breathe? Like, if it brings me joy and I feel grounded and supported, like, I don't care that maybe there's not a whole lot of like legit science behind, like, I don't, but that's my practice. You know what I mean? And so, like, I think it's okay and valid for everyone to be like, cool, that's awesome for you. That will work for me, but cool. But we don't always need to say how we feel about other people's practices either. And I think that's sort of what you're saying too. It's like, we don't need to say. And so the fact that you were even like, people are going to have opinions about this part of my practice or this modality that I use to help support myself. And it's just like, I guess my hope for everyone listening and generally is that we all can let go of what everyone else thinks is correct for supporting ourselves.
Right.
Because no one knows us the way we know us, and only we can
Right.
try stuff and see how it goes.
And it's even our spouses or our partners or our best friends. I mean, even people that are super close to us can have judgments about it. And I just
Totally.
drive by what makes me feel good. And I ask myself, what do I need right now?
Yes.
And that informs, if I want to sit in the morning, for a few moments of meditation, I will. And sometimes I'm like, no, I'm ready to move on. That's fine. There's no one's watching me.
I love that.
Right. Like
No
meditation shame, right? Like, no, I shouldn't be
exactly.
doing it for. I know. It's like, no, it's not working right now. Let me go find
Right.
something else.
Right.
What a transformative thought, Giselle. I'm so glad you just said that. No one's watching me.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Especially in your morning rituals or your
Right.
Yeah, I love that so much. That's so empowering. It's just like choose for yourself in the moment what feels good, what doesn't, what's working, what isn't, and move on, or don't.
Can you imagine though for a moment, gals, can you imagine if we entered every single day, all of us, with what's going to make us feel good? Like imagine if we were driven by feeling good. And I don't mean in the, going over the edge with, drugs and alcohol. I got nothing against, anything in moderation. I'm a down the middle kind of gal, but yeah, why not? Why not feel good?
Yeah.
If you want to sleep in, sleep in. If you want to, have a glass of wine, have a glass of wine. If you want to sit, go do that. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
I know. We ignore our instincts all the time. And look, and like you just said, there's some instincts that need support, different kinds of support, and need maybe some curbing in terms of like our totality of health. But yeah, I mean, in moderation, right, with balance, of course, right, we should be able to wake up and hopefully think, what's going to feel good for my body, for my mental health today, right now, and even if it's only going to last for 1 minute, isn't it worth giving yourself that 1 minute?
Yeah.
Or like what's stopping us, right? Like that's the other part of it. It's like, okay, so we wake up and we think about like what's gonna give me pleasure, what's gonna give me joy, but also like why aren't I giving it to myself? Right? Like
So
what is
true.
that barrier? Because there's always reasons.
Could it be capitalism?
Yeah, I know.
Could it be capitalism, maybe?
When Giselle was saying, like, if we just woke up, like, why don't we, like, find something that gives us joy? And I was like, capitalism.
Yeah. Totally.
Abby and I have been knowing each other for too long.
Yeah. I just think of politics. I just think of all the political leaders out there. And I think, gosh, if I had a, magic wand, if they were just to wake up and breathe well, just for a moment and take a pause and do something to look after their mental health. I mean, imagine what that might be like.
Yeah.
Imagine. I think we're going to be imagining for a while.
Yeah.
At least on that last note, Giselle, we'll digress from that point. How would you describe your relationship to anxiety? If you could put it into like a word or a phrase, we've had people give us like Facebook statuses for their relationship to anxiety these days. How would you describe it?
I am quite enamored by the yoga principles, yoga sutras. And I love the one that talks about effort and surrender. I think it's 2.46. And it talks about, in translation could be, we need a balance of both effort and surrender. And so that I feel like is my relationship. I put effort into it. I do all these strategies and, go for walks outside and talk to friends and yoga, mindful, all the things. Right. And then there's that piece that to surrender, to accept, to be curious and just notice, and it's okay. Like my daughter just arrived home before, and I'm actually in a situation that's perfect for today because I'm completely wound up. Right. So I don't usually have calls when my daughter's home, and I'm always afraid that she comes in, and I'm that person on the podcast who kids interrupts. So, she's home and, we just lost a friend last week and, she's been home for a strap. Like there's just a lot of things going on right now. And I said to her when she arrived home from school, she said, "How are you?" And I said, "Oh, good. How are you?" And then I said, "Actually, I'm a little nervous about going on this. I'm a little anxious about going on an anxious podcast. Isn't that funny?" Like that's just the noticing, like that's the surrender of like, I'm just going to name it to tame it, as Dan Siegel says,
Yes.
right? Like
Yes.
it's
Mhm.
fine. And I can model for her, right? Of,
Yes.
yeah, I'm human and
Right.
it's okay. And I'm
Right.
going to do it anyway. You know?
Yes. That's the
Yes.
modeling, right? It's like, I'm noticed feeling this way and I'm
Mm,
still going to do it. It's not going to define
yeah.
who I am in this moment. Like,
Right. Right.
yeah. Oh, I love that.
So good.
Yeah.
So
And I
good.
just want to say to all our listeners, Giselle has her own podcast, right? Like, like it's not like you've never done a podcast before,
Right.
right? And so,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it's like, okay, I understand it's the topic, but like
Right.
again, it's like it's amusing how anxiety pops up because it's like it's not like you've never like been on a podcast and talked about stuff, but it's like,
Right.
oh, okay, this topic anxiety is now showing up and being a little bit more noisy.
Yeah.
Although I always get like a little bit anxious before Margot and I record. So,
Yeah.
Totally.
it's like,
But this is so personal,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
That's the thing, Abby. This is so personal. That's the difference. It's much
yeah.
different being a host and asking questions, but
Mm-hmm.
when you
Totally.
open your heart to this community of people, we've been doing this for over a decade, right? What if people listen to this who've been following us for a long time and really hear about my inner thoughts?
Yeah.
That
Mm,
that could be scary. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean
interesting.
that's why we did it, right? Is to just
Yeah,
normalize being human,
totally.
right? Because I know that our listeners do have these thoughts and do have these
Hmm.
feelings and do have similar experiences, whether it's caregiving or the loss of a parent, And so this is it. It's like it's normalizing this so we all feel a little less alone in our own mental health journeys. Like, oh
Hmm.
yeah, Giselle, who I follow on Instagram and admire, and like she does so many cool things, like has similar experiences to me. Like
Yeah,
that's
totally.
cool. But I
Yeah.
hear you.
Exactly.
I hear you putting yourself out there. It's super vulnerable.
Yeah. And it's a risk, right? We all know like putting out elements of your story that even if some of them, you can stem back to why you do the work that you do or whatever and why you are who you are in the world in terms of like your business community, um, it's a risk that you take, right?
Mm,
Sharing
yeah.
parts of yourself that maybe feel unbusinesslike
Right.
um, or whatever. But for Abby and myself, we feel like our journey with anxiety is deeply related to our experience as kids
Mm,
yoga professionals and
yeah.
as people in the world. And
Yeah.
yeah, anyway. So, Giselle, if you could speak to a previous version of yourself, a younger version, a previous version, however you like to look at it, what kind of advice would you offer?
Well, I want to circle back to the Yoga Sutras, right? So the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, and there's four in particular that I love. So I've been practicing yoga since I was a little wee one with my mom, but I didn't learn yoga principles and philosophy until I took yoga teacher training in my early 30s or late 20s. So one of them I'm gonna say four if that's all right. So the 2.33, think the opposite when faced with negative thoughts. I think that's so important, is that
Mhm.
especially for us thinking, getting nervous. I think the opposite. I do that all the time.
Mm,
And then 133 is to be happy yourself. You must be happy for those around you. So there's just this constant reminder of, yes, I'm in my world and that, but really I'm here to make a difference to the world, right? Is
mm,
be really thinking out, reaching out. And I know, like Abby, you and I going through intense grief, and you have to kind of go in your cocoon. And then
Yeah.
when you're ready, you can step out, right? And be of service. And 132 is bring your mind to a single focus that will help eliminate life's obstacles. And I think this one's so great because it reminds me of, I can get this vata brain like, oh my gosh, I have so much to do,
Yeah.
and I can just freak myself out. And I have to stop and think, no, just do one thing in front of the other. It's
Mhm.
going to be okay. Right. And my daughter, actually, she sent me an email from school today. Oh my goodness. And it was just like, Mom, help. I have 4 packets of math. Oh my goodness. I'm scared. I'm overwhelmed. There's a test. And I was like, oh, that's amazing, because now at 12 years old, she's finally able to express herself. So that's a huge win. And oh my goodness, I see you. I am like that too, right? And now I'll tell her, come back home. We'll just do one math problem at a
Yes.
time. right?
Yes. Oh, I
And
love
then
Yes.
that fourth one I mentioned earlier, we need a balance of both effort and surrender in life. I
Yeah.
absolutely love that. We don't have to always be fixing and moving and changing, but we can sit and relax and surrender.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that
Those
balance.
are beautiful
Yeah.
reflections. Thank you.
I love the single focus because I so
Yep.
relate. Like
Right.
when you have a lot going on, there's still a lot going on. It's like, what do I do? What do I do? At least that feels like that grasping in your
Yeah.
mind. And it's like, no, it's like, let's one focus and follow it
Mhm.
through until we get to the next. Like, what was it? It
Yeah.
was a single focus to overcome obstacles.
Yeah. So bring your mind to a single focus. Bringing your mind to a single focus will help eliminate life's obstacles. So this is the translation from the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, translated by Alistair Shearer. You've done this one.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Not familiar with
Long
that.
time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a great one. This is really accessible. I mean,
I
this
think it
is,
would,
it's really, I want to say too, that chapter, the second chapter is very of our masculine because it's very prescriptive. And I think there's an opportunity for us to bring our feminine mind to what these concepts are and sort of feel them and think about them, being creative about them.
just going back to again, because I also have adult ADHD, something that always helps serve me too, and I wish the younger version of me knew this, is just like, what if I could put like a viewfinder over just the top task? And then
Yeah.
you could only see the next one when that task was completed. It's like, I love making lists. To-do lists usually help me out really a lot. But when the to-do list has 30 things on it, and unrealistically, I can't get them, or realistically, I can't get them all done today or even this week, it's because I'm looking at 30 things. That's not helpful, right? And so like trying to make a list smaller is sometimes even more challenging. And then I'm stressed about not being able to make the list smaller. And so, what if we could just put that viewfinder? I like think of it as like 3D glasses, the one red, one blue, or like, what I'm saying? Were they not 3D glasses, or like just as, do you know what I'm talking about, Abby?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Have you
just
read?
see the one thing.
Yeah. Have you read Stolen Focus?
No.
Oh my gosh, that book will blow your mind. I think the author is Johann Hari. It was like one of the number one Amazon books, I think a couple years ago.
Okay.
Wow.
Writing it
And
down.
it's not like a Stolen Focus. It's not like a good news book. So you can read it like chapter to chapter and you can kind of marinate on it.
Yeah. Okay.
It is really such a deeper understanding. It's kind of like breath in a way that helps you understand breath. And this is really helping us understand, whoa, this ADHD that our whole planet is experiencing. Whether you have ADHD, definitely there's folks that are, diagnosed is real. It's real for them, but our whole culture is experiencing ADD, right? And so reading this book, it really gets to the source of why and what, not even, he doesn't even have like here's what you need to do at the end. It's more of a, this is what it is. And and let's face it, instead of avoiding it, and pretending our children are going to be all of a sudden focused tomorrow if we do this, this, and this. But how do we embrace it as an entire planet? This is the new way of being,
I mean, even though it doesn't sound like a lighthearted reading, one, I kind of like that he doesn't tell us how to fix it. Because sometimes like I can't keep reading books where some expert knows me better than me and how to fix it. Because then I'm like, no, you're wrong. My habits are way too clever for you, expert in a book. Right. So I like that he didn't really necessarily say that. And then like, how do we learn to accept? Right. Which kind of sounds like surrender. Right.
Right. Yes.
Surrendering
yes.
to where we are now in our.
Yeah. And actually that reminds me of anxiety. I read this book about how to calm an anxious child, and I read it and I'm thinking, that is not going to work for us, and I think that's what, for me, and I'm sure it works for a lot of people, but to your point, Abby, that I think for some of us folks, instead of trying to prescribe do this, and this, no, I think there's an opportunity to think the opposite, right? And stop trying to fix it. Stop trying to make it go away. Just go, oh, there it is. That's that beautiful part of me. What's wrong with that? It's making me who I am. Right?
Right. Not everything needs to be fixed. Right. Exactly. It's like,
I love it. I'm looking at it as a beautiful part of you too. It's just So good. All right. Well, last question before we get into some lightning round fun. What does being an anxiety warrior mean to you? When you hear this phrase, what comes up?
Yeah, well, let's continue that thread, right? Oh, the amazing Judith Judith Hanson Lassiter. She read
Oh,
the nonviolent communication, Elena Brower was talking about her one time, and you put your hand on your chest and you say, "How human of me." And
Mm.
I've used that more time the last couple of years, like, how human of me. That's my anxiety warrior, being proud of who I
mm,
am and I'm human. And, to continue what we are saying, that it's all okay. We're beautiful people the way we are. We don't have to pretend to be anything else, right? We need people like us out in the world, and we're human. How human of
mhm.
me. And for that, it just softens my shoulders, my whole body. Like,
Love it. That's so
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah.
How
I
human
mean,
of me.
Margot and I are both like somatic hold lovers, like placing our hands on our heart, and we're both affirmation lovers, right? And like this affirmation of acceptance, how human of me. Like,
mm,
duh, right? But also like we need those
yes,
reminders, like we
yes.
really do. And so to connect like that, oh, I
Right.
love it. Love it.
Well, yeah,
So
to
good.
take it to next level,
Yeah,
you could put one
right.
on
Yep.
the head and one on the head and one on the heart. Yeah,
Yeah.
that
Yes.
just holding that it's amazing.
Mm.
It is amazing for sure. Oh, I just feel like cold and warm all over. I'm like my body's reacting right now to this conversation in such an interesting way. And I don't think it has anything to do with the temperature in my house. I just feel like I have like full body chills and I'm also feel warm and grounded and safe. So I've
Mm,
just loved very much having this conversation with you. And I'm so grateful for you to share so much with our warriors so generously.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for
All right.
indulging me.
Yeah. Not at all. It's our pleasure.
Mm.
Okay, but we're gonna play for just a few minutes and get to know you a little bit better. Are you ready
Mhm.
for
Oh yeah, bring it on.
lightning
Lightning
round?
round.
Lightning. I like that you added your own little. We always do the.
Yes,
You kind of did like a. I
I
was like,
loved it.
it's
Yeah.
got layers. The
Right.
lightning's got layers.
I know. I feel like I needed an outfit, like a Superwoman, like a Wonder Woman outfit. Come on me.
Oh, all right. I'm imagining it. I'm
Yes.
visualizing it. Okay, you're in a different outfit in my mind now. Love that visual. All right, so we're just going to go back and forth and ask you a handful of questions to help us get to know you a little bit better and our listeners.
Excellent.
Okay, I'm going to go first. Share with us your favorite sound in the world.
Oh, and first thing comes to mind. So after my dad passed, a friend of mine sent me this wood chime that I have in my room. It's supposed to be outdoor chime, and it has like on it something written about grief and your loved ones or something. But I have it in my room, and I hit it in the morning to say good morning world, and I welcome my mom and dad and the angels, and
Mm.
that sound is amazing.
Oh,
Wow.
beautiful.
I love that.
Incredible.
That was in my mind when Marco asked that. I was like, that is a really hard question, but I love it. You were like, I got it. Like, I have
You
the
never know how
sound.
the lightning round questions are going to land on
Yeah,
folks. And so I
right.
gotcha that one. That was
That was a
good.
great one.
I
Um,
should send you the link because I feel like everyone should have this. It's beautiful.
yeah.
All
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
right.
And what a
lovely.
way to like start your morning. Like
Yeah,
that sounds
right.
really lovely. Yeah.
Yeah. I
And
feel
like
like it
connecting, like,
yes, it
yeah.
does. That's what it is, Abby. It's the connection, and it helps me. It sets the space, it sets
Yeah.
the day, and then I can sit, and call in
Yeah.
all my people. Yeah,
I
my
love it.
support crew.
Yeah.
Love it. Love it.
So you mentioned at one point that you've been to Australia.
Mhm.
So I'm super curious, like, where were you in Australia and how long were you there? And like, what is like one like thing you really loved about Australia?
That's so interesting. So my husband's Australian, right? So I do have an
Ah,
Australian
okay.
passport. So we go
Mm-hmm.
there quite, every couple years. What do I love most about it? Well, it's almost like it's the opposite. It's really what I wish I could see. So I lived in Sydney. I worked at the American school in Sydney, and I kind of hit the ground running. I arrived as a backpacker with a tiny backpack on my back, and then went right into teaching because I had to, make money to stay there because it's a big city and it's expensive. But what I hope for myself is to really be able to travel. I want to see Ayers Rock, and I want to go to Darwin, and I want to see the outback. But it really is all that people say. The animals are cool. When you first see your first kangaroo, and then your echidna. I mean, echidnas are amazing. And the search for platypus, and the beaches, and yeah, it's a really spectacular place.
Love that.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay. Which celebrity would play you in a movie about you?
Oh, I am not a pop culture person, but I do think about Meg Ryan. No, Meg Ryan? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a person.
Mail?
Depends on if that's who you mean.
You've got mail. That's her.
She's got mail.
Okay, good.
She's Meg
Right.
Ryan.
I remember that way back when. That was what, 80s or 90s or something?
Yeah.
She was big around that time. Yeah.
Yeah. I think she worked in a bookstore. And if I were to live my life again, I would have loved to have owned my own bookstore, especially a children's bookstore.
Yes.
So, and I loved how she is quite flighty like I am. And she's, a little absent-minded, and
I think that's a good casting for you.
Yeah.
I see it.
Right.
I see it. I see it.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of myself because I am really not good at celebrities. So
I was going to say your reference is like 30 years old, but that's cool. That's cool.
But you knew again,
you knew.
like Margot, these questions, I'm like stumped. I'm like, Paul Rudd, like who would play me? Like, I mean, I love
Paul Rudd would play you.
I love him, so that's what I.
All
thought.
right, fair enough.
It's
gender fluid.
Yeah. I mean, picking a female would be much harder. So I'm just, Giselle, I'm so impressed how quick you are with these.
Oh,
for real.
Yeah.
Okay. So you seem like a book nerd, which is a big compliment, right?
Yes. Oh, I'm that's totally a compliment.
Yeah. We're fellow book nerds here, very big readers. What is one fiction and one nonfiction book that you would always recommend to people to read?
Oh, I love this. Oh my gosh. Have you read The Women by Kristen Hanna?
It's on my Libby account.
I have like 30 pages left. I'm almost done with it.
Oh my gosh.
It's amazing.
Drop the phone. Oh my gosh. That I just read recently, and that is the one book I wish everyone on the planet. I had no idea. I wasn't expecting it. And when I first got into it, it's so violent with the war scenes, and I thought, whoa. And I love Kristen Hanna. I've read a few of her books, and everyone kept saying, just keep going,
Yeah.
But what's so fascinating about that book is I was in Vietnam 20 years ago, and I went to the War Memorial, War Rembrandt, whatever museum. And being a Canadian myself, we didn't learn a lot about Vietnam War in school. I think it was too recent. And so American tourists, I would never forget, they said to me, don't believe everything you see, right? And so for me, it was a real journey, remembering what my experiences were backpacking around Vietnam and wondering if you could still backpack there now. I don't know. And the women, the nurses, like thinking even present day during the pandemic. I mean, that book and the mental health, the trauma. It has everything. It's just a life changer, that book. Okay, good. I could go on. Nonfiction. I'm going to go back to Breath. Yeah. I'm going to go back to Breath. Breath by James Nestor. I feel like that was, he's a journalist. It's super interesting. The stories are relevant and fun and fascinating, and it's juicy. I read it twice. Like, I don't read it twice. Yeah.
Right. That's a big seller right there.
That's a big seller,
I like that. It's juicy too. That was a seller for me. Juicy.
Okay. Yeah. And I've got like tags. Like, I never do that. Right.
I love it.
Love it.
It's one that's been on my TBR for a while too. But like everyone I know that's read it is like, why haven't you read it yet? I'm like, I'm sorry, I'll get to it.
I know.
But it looks like an incredible book.
All right. I kind of love that it's the women and breath. That's interesting because it's about us embracing our women folk, if in the female form, however that shows up for us, and also the one thing about breathing. That's kind of interesting that those two books came up.
Love it.
All right, my final question. It's a two-parter. Do you listen to music when you run? And if you do, what's like one jam on your playlist that like is like a go-to for motivation?
I listen to the Peloton app when I run.
Okay.
I am someone moved. Music for me is how it makes me feel. So I love the electric like music or like Sandstorm, that kind of
Yes.
jazzes me out. You know,
I am so
I'm
stunned right now by that answer, by the way. Just I did not expect that song to come out of your mouth.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I lived in, I'm like, this Guatemala keeps bringing up. You know why? Because I booked a flight there later this year. And so it's really a present for me. But I mean, we danced, as teachers, we
Great
worked hard all
song.
week and we just danced all weekend. So Latin music is a big love. And yeah, just anything groovy.
Yes.
I love Ed Sheeran. I love all the pop music my daughter listens to. But I couldn't say one,
Yeah.
No,
it's
no,
like,
yeah.
No,
That's why I try to make it open-ended.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good
Yeah.
mix of motivational stuff. Awesome.
Okay, my final question. So you're a big traveler. Where is some place that you haven't gone yet that you want to go?
Ooh, Africa. I said in my, with the grade 12 annual books that you have, and I actually said in mine, see you in Africa on a camel.
Oh.
And I've never been. And I'm
Wow.
dying to go. Yeah.
I'm
All
sure
right.
that'll happen at some
Yes.
point. Maybe to bring your daughter. And there'll be a whole thing.
Yes.
Amazing. Well, before we have you share with our listeners how they can find you and connect with you, we like to ask all of our guests to offer everyone a win of the week, big or small. Something that's happened to you. It doesn't have to be this week. It could be just recently that has felt like a win.
Awesome. So we just started our spring session for our school yoga program and I love it. I mean, it brings me so much joy. We do it in spring and fall. So I'm just excited to welcome the new people in and see what programs they develop for their communities and the difference they're going to make. And we just have the most incredible people. There's just nothing quite like seeing this work in action and watching people be inspired and ultimately for the health and well-being of our children. It's an honor, honestly, and a gift to work with these folks.
You are so inspiring, Giselle.
Thank you.
So tell our listeners how they can connect with you.
So we're Kids Yoga Stories. So we're on, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and our website, kidsyogastories.com. Email me, and our team here is Giselle, Giselle at kidsyogastories.com. We'd love to connect.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much again for being with us, for sharing your story, for sharing your vulnerability and your time so generously.
Thank you so much, you too. Namaste.
Bye. Namaste. Warriors. I could have talked to Giselle all day.
Yeah.
She's just we use the word lovely a lot, but it's true. She's just lovely.
Yeah. And so relatable in the sense that like so much that she said, I wanted to say like, yeah, me too. Or I wanted to ask follow-up questions and learn more, or, like relatable, personable, like lovely, like you said, like
informative.
Like just a total joy connecting, which is
totally. Oh man, I want to say a million things. I think my first big takeaway is I really appreciated the way Giselle highlighted the sort of pre-daughter anxiety versus her post, becoming a mother anxiety. I think that this part was just extremely relatable to certainly those of us that have, are living in middle age and have come through different iterations of their anxiety. And so I just thought it was fascinating how it made so much sense to me in my mind how a person would sort of have maybe different, but sort of less stress and anxiety that's like, I need to do something about this, right? It's debilitating in a certain way versus when it came to being with her daughter, it was like, oh, I need to do something about this, right? And I'm motivated to do something about this. But the compassion, it sounds like, was different for Giselle, for herself versus for what she was dealing with in this stage of her life, as a parent and someone who was caring for her parents and then losing them. And yeah, so I just greatly appreciated sort of the balance that she struck throughout the entire conversation. Actually, she talked about balance a lot in so many things, in her coping strategies, you know, in her story. And so I just, I think I really just have clung to that since we ended the interview, just like those elements.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, there's like a lot of different things. Again, like you just said, there's so many different things we could share and have so many takeaways with. Something that just really stuck to me, like I was just so amused by her sharing her time in Guatemala. And like just really how like when we're living in the experience versus when we're thinking about it later on versus when we're thinking about it like someone else's experience for us, right? Like she was talking about how like, you know, we didn't have these words for anxiety, but she said like, you know, people would call me a worry wart, or my skin was too sensitive, you know, I had sensitive skin, or I had to, you know, and yet she was like, yeah, and I traveled and I did all these things, right? And so when I heard her saying that, I was like, yeah, I had anxiety and didn't know I had anxiety, and I traveled too. But then hearing her talk about Guatemala and like the potential of kids getting kidnapped and men walking around with guns and everything, I was like, oh my God, like it just made me wonder, like, would I have handled it as gracefully as she did during that time, right? I mean, I know she had stomach issues and all that, like it was manifesting in other ways.
Right.
Or would I have had anxiety during that time? Like when we're younger with anxiety, do we not get as anxious about things? Like it just made me
Or it's like I said, what, you're not going to do anything about it. You're kind of like, well, this is just it. So keep going about your business.
Right. You know? And so like, but in hindsight, like hearing her story, right, I'm like, oh my God, I would have had so much anxiety, but maybe I wouldn't, because like, I don't remember having that much anxiety like when I went by myself to Australia, right? Different. No fears of people I know getting kidnapped and no men with guns, but still, right? And so it was, for me, it was just this really amusing moment where it's like, oh yeah, we do all these things with our anxiety, and then when we share it, how do other people hear that through their lens of anxiety, right? Like how do we change in our relationship with anxiety? Anyway, so that really stuck out to me, because it's just always so fascinating that it doesn't matter, our anxiety story is always different than someone else's, and the things we think might cause people anxiety doesn't always cause them anxiety.
Right. Yeah, 100%. I think that Giselle's like dedication to understanding herself as someone that is here to serve others, right? Whether it be her students, the community that she serves, people in her business, her family, her child, right? That was also, it just had a strong undercurrent to so many of the things that she said, was just like being of service and how to feel good in order to be of service. And so I really felt appreciative that she spent a lot of time highlighting the various modalities of taking care of herself and showing herself love and support. And I just think that was one of my favorite parts of this interview, because I feel like is sometimes the most, let's go with helpful, for lack of a better word in this moment, parts of our interviews, when we ask our guests to share how they support themselves, because those are the moments when I'm hoping, I mean, yes, we want our audience to be connected. Of course, we want them to relate and hear parts of themselves and people's stories. But we also hope that they're going to come away with some things that they can try, or some things that they can at least be curious about. And so I really loved the way she shared with so much joy, you know, and almost like levels of perseverance. Deciding to go on medication and try that out for 6 months and see what happens, you know? And she talked about running and yoga and breath work. I mean, she talked about Eastern medicine and doing auric work and energy healing and that kind of things, and pulling angel cards. And like, I found myself feeling really joyful thinking about, it felt like a lot of possibilities. It was like, I love the level of openness that this human that's sharing this with us has to supporting her own mental and physical and overall well-being.
Right.
So to sum it up, I'm just grateful that she shared so openly so many interesting things that work for her.
Yeah.
And
that
she
are
really,
nourishing, right? For her, like that, right. And how her willingness to try loads of different things, to see like, all right, what works, what feels good.
and to release shame
Yeah.
around those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On both sides, right? Western and Eastern. Like I appreciated that balance there.
Uh-huh.
I feel like again, like we keep saying, there's so many different takeaways that we could talk about. I feel like I'm really torn between two, because I'm just going to say that I really appreciated the effort and surrender, right? I feel like that just so deeply resonates within me, of that balance of putting effort towards things, but also surrendering towards moments and things too. But that's not going to be my takeaway. And what my second takeaway is going to be is really, so, we made this podcast to normalize talk on mental health and anxiety and really just embrace our humanness. And I think that one of the things that, like, in the mental health talk, that like in the community of mental health, that still really isn't like talked about that much, is being a caregiver. Right. And she is a mom, which is a caregiver, right? Like, and that's just it, and then she talked about how her mom had cancer. And I'm sure there was caregiving going on there in some sense, right? Whether physical or emotional or whatever. And I just don't think there's enough conversation until once you're a caregiver about what that really is like. And as someone that was a caregiver for my dad in his last, few weeks of life, the message I always heard was like, you're so strong. And I think it's nice to like honor people's resilience, but I think there needs to be more conversation around what it means to be a caregiver and how to support caregivers. And, how can caregivers have a break without feeling shame around it? Or, how can caregivers surrender to feeling hopeless or helpless or overwhelmed? Or, like, I just feel like when she like mentioned just a few times about caregiving, it was like, oh, this needs to be highlighted more. People need more resources for this. This is really hard. And you never know when you're going to be the caregiver, right? It's just kind of something that kind of happens, right? And then how do you navigate that? And so that was really just a takeaway for me, is like, I appreciated her bringing up caregiving. And then it made me think about like, how can we shed more light on the caregiving experience in a way that is supportive to caregivers.
I love that. I love that.
Thanks.
It is so important. Yeah. And I just think that, caregiver is a very broad word, right? Like I would argue that teachers are caregivers, right? There are so many people. I feel like what I'm hearing from you is that you're talking more about caregiving for people in your direct family, or do I have that wrong? Like,
I'm ultimately, I'm thinking about people in your direct family.
Okay.
Your,
right.
So
like the level of care that is required when somebody needs, like, say 24/7 kind of assistance, and the difference between that versus like, hey, my job is to care for others, right? When they're in my space or whatever. Right. So that distinction, for sure. I would completely agree. It's people are not supported, or there's at least not enough conversation, as you said, around those people's needs and how challenging it is to literally have nothing to do sometimes but care for another human
and have to live a life too, and still have to work, or still have to food shop, or like do mundane
tasks
stuff
that we take for granted. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Oh gosh. We could literally spend, I feel like we could spend hours dissecting this conversation even deeper. There was just so many layers and wonderful things that Giselle shared with us, and we are so grateful. Giselle, thank you so much for being a guest. And thank you all, warriors, for being with us. If you'd like to connect with us for any reason, you can join our Instagram family. We are at Anxiety Warriors Podcast. Feel free to shoot us an email at anxietywarriorspodcast@gmail.com. You can shout out your wins of the week, big or small. Share any topic ideas that you have with us, or if you think you would be an amazing guest on our show, let us know. Let's get you on the calendar and help you tell your story here on the pod. Please take a moment and smash that 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're tuning in right now. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. All of our episodes are uploaded for you over there. And if you're feeling extra generous, you can jump into our show notes and click on our Threadless merch shop link and grab yourself something fun.
Yeah. Spring's in the air, right?
It is. Yeah.
It's in the air.
Yeah. Literally pollen everywhere.
Yes. Thank you all so much for going on this journey with us. We're so grateful to do this with you all.
Till next time.